He should have dropped the box long before the cold took everything else. Former Gunnery Sergeant Caleb Morgan saw the shape beneath the culvert shelter just after sunrise, half hidden by wind-blown snow along a county service road outside Missoula, Montana. At first, he thought it was a fallen branch. Then his headlights caught the outline of a German shepherd. Caleb braked hard enough to send loose gravel beneath the tires and stepped into air sharp enough to burn his lungs. The dog lay curled against the concrete wall, dark sable fur stiff with ice. Snow gathered along his shoulders and back. An olive-green ammunition box rested against his chest. A frayed canvas strap disappeared between his jaws. Caleb stopped 3 feet away. "Duke." One ear moved. Barely. Caleb felt something inside him tighten. He had not seen Duke in almost 4 years, not since Staff Sergeant Aaron Hayes was gone, and the old military working dog retired into another handler's care. Duke had been younger then, stronger. The kind of dog who could cross a training field with silent purpose and make every person nearby understand that he already knew what mattered. Now his breathing was shallow. His paws were half buried in snow. Caleb dropped to one knee. "Easy, old man. It is me." Duke opened his eyes. Recognition came slowly, but it came. Caleb removed his gloves and touched the side of the dog's neck. Cold. Too cold. He reached for the ammunition box, intending to move it aside before lifting Duke. The moment his fingers touched the canvas strap, Duke tightened his jaw. Not a growl. Not a warning. Just pressure. Caleb froze. "You have got to be kidding me." Duke's eyes stayed on him. Caleb tried again, more gently this time, lifting only an inch of slack from the strap. The dog used what little strength remained to pull the box closer against his chest. Caleb stared at him. The reaction was deliberate. The dog was barely strong enough to raise his head, yet he was still choosing to hold on. Wind moved through the pines above the road with a low whisper. Snow tapped softly against the metal box. Caleb looked at the faded paint, the scratched corners, the old military latch. Nothing about it explained why Duke was willing to spend his last energy protecting it. "All right," Caleb said quietly. "I'm not taking it from you." Duke's jaw loosened by the smallest amount. Caleb pulled an emergency blanket from his pickup and wrapped it around the dog's body without touching the strap again. Then he slid one arm beneath Duke's chest and another beneath his hindquarters. The dog did not resist being lifted, but the ammunition box dragged through the snow beside them, still connected by the strap clenched between his teeth. Caleb carried both toward the truck, step by careful step. At the rear door, Duke's grip finally slipped for half a second. Caleb thought he would let go. Instead, the dog turned his head, found the strap again, and held it. Caleb looked into those tired brown eyes and understood something that made the morning feel colder. Duke was not afraid of losing the box. He was afraid of failing to deliver it. Caleb opened the rear door and eased Duke onto the back seat. But the moment he tried to slide the ammunition box onto the floor, the German shepherd tightened his grip on the canvas strap again. "All right," Caleb said. "It stays with you." He placed the box against Duke's front legs and pulled the emergency blanket higher around the dog's shoulders. Only then did Duke stop fighting the movement. The drive back to Caleb's cabin took 20 minutes. He kept the heater warm but not hot, one hand steady on the wheel while the other reached back twice to make sure Duke was still breathing. Each time, Duke's eyes opened just enough to find the box. When they reached the cabin, Caleb carried both inside together. He set Duke on thick blankets near the stone fireplace and placed the ammunition box within reach. The dog's jaw finally loosened, but he did not fully release the strap until Caleb laid one hand on his shoulder and said, "You made it." Duke let go. The sound was small, canvas against wood, but Caleb felt it in his chest. He called Dr. Emily Carter before taking off his coat. She arrived less than half an hour later with a medical bag, snow on her boots, and the calm focus of someone who had treated retired working dogs before. She checked Duke's temperature, gums, breathing, paws, hydration, and heart rate. "He is cold, exhausted, and dehydrated," she said. "But he is responding." Caleb exhaled. Emily adjusted the blankets and moved Duke a few feet farther from the fire. Slow warming. Small amounts of water. No rushing him. Caleb nodded. "He walked here carrying that box." Emily glanced at the scratched olive-green metal. "From where?" "I do not know yet." Duke opened his eyes when she looked at it. Caleb noticed. Emily noticed too. "Do not test him right now," she said. "Let him rest." So Caleb waited. 1 hour passed. Then another. Outside, snow drifted against the porch steps. Inside, the cabin smelled of wet fur, coffee, cedar smoke, and cold metal slowly reaching room temperature. Duke drank a little water. His breathing became deeper. Caleb sat on the floor nearby and resisted looking at the latch. He wanted to know what was inside. He wanted to know how a dog he had not seen in years had ended up on his road, carrying something that looked older than the snow around it. But every time curiosity rose, he looked at Duke instead. The dog had already answered the only question that mattered that morning. Care first. Hours later, when Emily was satisfied that Duke was stable enough to sleep, Caleb stood to move the ammunition box away from the damp blanket. He lifted it less than 6 inches. Duke's head came up immediately. Caleb stopped. Easy. He lowered the box beside the dog again. Duke settled. Caleb tried a second time, this time moving it only toward the edge of the rug. Duke pushed one paw forward and touched the canvas strap. Not hard. Just enough. Caleb looked at Emily. He still thinks the job is not done. Emily folded her arms. Then maybe the job is not about the box staying close. Caleb looked down at Duke. The dog was no longer staring at the ammunition box. His eyes had shifted past Caleb toward the far wall. Caleb turned. Hanging from an old wooden peg beside the hallway was a worn leather working dog collar. Aaron's collar. Caleb had not touched it in years. He took it down slowly. Duke watched every inch of the movement. When Caleb brought the collar near the box, Duke leaned forward, touched the metal side once with his nose, and relaxed. Caleb stared at him. The room went quiet again. The box was not the only thing Duke had carried back from the past. Caleb kept Aaron's old working dog collar beside the ammunition box and waited. Duke's breathing stayed slow and even, but his eyes remained open now, following Caleb with the same quiet attention he used to have on training days. Emily stayed near the fireplace, saying nothing. Caleb understood why. If this was a pattern, they had to let the dog show it without forcing anything. He walked to a narrow shelf near the hallway and opened a small wooden tray. Inside sat an old Marine Corps Challenge coin, darkened slightly with age. Aaron had given it to Caleb after a winter training exercise outside Great Falls. Caleb had almost forgotten it was there. The moment he picked it up, Duke raised his head. Caleb stopped halfway across the room. You remember this too? He placed the coin beside the collar. Duke leaned forward, touched the side of the ammunition box once with his nose, then looked directly at Caleb. Same response. Caleb felt the shape of the old memory forming. Not clearly. Not yet. He turned toward the far wall, where several framed photographs hung above a small cabinet. One showed Caleb, Aaron, and Duke standing together on a dusty training field years earlier. Aaron was smiling. Caleb was squinting into the sun. Duke sat between them, younger, stronger, perfectly alert. Caleb removed the photograph from the wall. Duke's ears came forward before he even reached the rug. Emily noticed. That makes 3. Caleb nodded slowly. Collar. Coin. Photograph. He set the frame beside the other 2 objects. Duke pushed himself upright. Emily moved instinctively, but Caleb lifted one hand. Let him choose. The German Shepherd stood for only a few seconds, shaky but deliberate. He looked at the collar, then the coin, then the photograph. Finally, he looked at Caleb. Something old returned to Caleb all at once. A training field. Aaron's voice. Cold morning air. Duke waiting beside a locked equipment case while Aaron explained a recipient verification drill. 3 confirmations before release, Aaron had said. Caleb had laughed at the time. That seems excessive. Aaron had shrugged. Only if the wrong person never shows up. Caleb stared at Duke now. That is what this is. Emily looked from the dog to the 3 objects. He needed you to recognize them? More than recognize them. Caleb crouched beside Duke. He needed to know I was the intended recipient. He touched the collar first. Aaron's. Duke touched the box. Caleb touched the coin. Mine from the winter exercise. Duke touched the box again. Caleb picked up the photograph. His thumb rested briefly against Aaron's face. And all 3 of us. Duke's eye stayed on him. Caleb lowered the photograph beside the other markers and said the word that had surfaced with the memory. Confirmed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Duke's jaw loosened around the frayed canvas strap. The fabric slipped from his mouth and fell softly against the floor. Caleb did not move. Duke looked at the box one final time, then lowered his head onto the blanket. His eyes closed. Emily exhaled. He let go. Caleb watched the old dog settle into sleep. The ammunition box sat between the three markers, ordinary now in a way it had not been minutes earlier. Caleb finally understood. Duke had not been guarding the contents from him. He had been carrying out the last part of a delivery that had waited years for the right person to remember the rules. Caleb waited until Duke had been asleep for nearly 40 minutes before he touched the ammunition box again. Emily checked the dog twice during that time, then gave a small nod. He is stable. Let him rest. Caleb sat on the floor beside the rug, the old leather collar, challenge coin, and faded photograph still arranged near the box like pieces of a language he had almost forgotten. Outside, the wind had weakened. Snow slid from the cabin roof in soft sheets, and the fire had burned down to a deep orange glow. Caleb placed one hand on the metal lid. Duke did not move. No lifted head. No paw reaching for the strap. The delivery was finished. Caleb released the latch. The sound was quiet but sharp in the room. He lifted the lid slowly. Inside, everything had been packed with the same careful order Aaron used on training days. Dog tags rested in one corner. Duke's retired service patch lay beneath them. A small digital recorder had been wrapped in a square of faded cloth. Beside it was an old Christmas photograph, a child's envelope, and a wooden ornament shaped like a tiny house. Caleb stopped breathing for a second. The ornament was simple. Hand-painted red roof. Crooked white windows. A small loop of twine at the top. Child-made. Imperfect. Familiar in a way Caleb could not immediately place. Then he saw the envelope. His name was written across the front in large, uneven letters. For Uncle Caleb. Do not open until Christmas. Caleb stared at it. The paper had yellowed slightly along the edges. In the lower corner, someone had written a date. For years earlier. Emily looked at him. You remember it? Caleb did not answer. He remembered the Christmas. Aaron's house outside Missoula. Snow piled against the porch rail. Lily running through the hallway in red socks. Duke sleeping beneath the dining table. Aaron arguing with the oven because the ham was cooking too slowly. Caleb had arrived late, carrying 2 bottles of sparkling cider and a gift bag for Lily. He had stayed through dinner. Helped clear plates. Fixed a loose cabinet hinge because Aaron mentioned it once. Then dessert came out. Pie. Coffee. Lily disappeared upstairs for something. Caleb had looked at the clock, put on his coat, and left before she came back down. He had told himself the roads were getting worse. The truth was simpler. The room had felt too warm, too familiar, too much like something he could lose. Caleb picked up the photograph from the box. Aaron stood beside the Christmas tree with one hand on Lily's shoulder. She was 7 then, smiling toward the camera. Duke sat at her feet wearing a ridiculous red bow around his collar. On the far side of the table was an empty chair. Caleb's chair. He turned the photograph over. Aaron's handwriting covered the back. She waited until midnight. Caleb closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Duke was still asleep. Emily said nothing. Caleb placed the photograph down and picked up the tiny wooden house. The paint was uneven beneath his thumb. One side had a blue door. Above it, in small shaky letters, Lily had written one word. Stay? Caleb looked toward the envelope again. He had spent years believing that Christmas had ended when he drove away through the snow. The box was telling him it had not ended at all. Someone had been waiting for him to come back. Caleb held the ornament for a long moment before setting it beside the photograph. The word stay remained facing upward. One small word, painted by a 7-year-old child, and somehow it carried more weight than the ammunition box itself. He reached for the envelope. The paper made a dry sound beneath his fingers. For Uncle Caleb. Do not open until Christmas. For years late was still Christmas somewhere, he thought. He carefully lifted the flap. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper covered in Lily's uneven handwriting. The letters leaned in different directions. Some words were larger than others. Caleb began reading silently, but halfway through the first sentence, Emily moved closer to the fire and gave him the privacy of pretending not to listen. Caleb started again, this time aloud. Dear Uncle Caleb, I made you a house because you always go home before everybody else. His voice stopped. He looked toward the tiny ornament. Red roof, white windows, blue door. He continued. Dad says everybody needs somewhere they can stay. I think you should have one too. Caleb swallowed. The next line had been written in darker pencil, as if Lily had pressed harder. You can hang it at our house if you want, because you are already there a lot. Caleb lowered the letter. A memory came back with painful clarity. Lily standing on a kitchen chair while Aaron helped her cut construction paper. Duke lying beneath the table. Christmas music playing too quietly from an old speaker. Caleb had walked through that room, carrying firewood, and never asked what they were making. He had been physically present and emotionally halfway gone. The letter continued. Please do not leave before pie, because I want to show you something after dinner. Caleb closed his eyes. That was why she had gone upstairs. Not for a toy. Not because she was tired. She had gone to get this. He had already been pulling on his coat. He remembered Aaron standing near the doorway and saying, "You sure you cannot stay another hour?" Caleb had blamed the weather, the roads, the early morning, anything that sounded practical. Lily had come downstairs after he left carrying a wooden house he never knew existed. Caleb finished the final line. If you come back tomorrow, I will save your peace. There was no signature beyond a crooked heart and the letter L. Caleb folded the paper carefully, but his hands were no longer steady. Emily looked toward Duke. The old German shepherd slept deeply, paws twitching once beneath the blanket as if running somewhere warmer. Aaron kept all of this, Caleb said. For 4 years. Emily nodded toward the recorder. Maybe he wanted to explain why. Caleb picked it up. The plastic casing was scratched but intact. A small label had been taped across the back in Aaron's handwriting. Play only after the letter. Caleb gave a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. He planned everything. Maybe not everything, Emily said. Maybe only the part he was afraid you would misunderstand. Caleb pressed the power button. The screen flickered once, then lit. He hesitated over play. The cabin had grown completely still. Firelight moved across the dog tags, the photograph, and the small wooden house. Caleb looked again at the empty chair in the Christmas picture. For 4 years, he had believed leaving early had protected him from getting too attached. Now he understood what that choice had looked like from the other side of the table. He pressed play. Static filled the room. Then Aaron's voice returned from the past, calm and familiar. Caleb, if you are hearing this, then Duke finally found a way to make you stay long enough to listen. You keep confusing leaving first with hurting less. Aaron's recorded voice filled the cabin, low and steady beneath the soft crackle of the fire. Caleb did not move. The sentence landed with the precision of something Aaron had probably wanted to say in person and never managed to. You show up. You fix things. You carry boxes, repair fences, bring gifts, make sure everybody gets home safe. Then the work is done, and you disappear before anybody can ask you to stay. Caleb looked down at Lily's letter resting beside the small wooden house. Duke slept near the fireplace, finally free of the canvas strap he had carried through the snow. Aaron continued. You think leaving early means you will miss the worst part later. Maybe you are right. But it also means you miss the best part while it is still happening. Caleb closed his eyes. Christmas dinners, summer cookouts, birthdays, even ordinary Sunday afternoons. He remembered the same pattern in all of them. He arrived useful. He left before becoming necessary. Lily noticed before I did, Aaron said. Every time you reached for your coat, she watched the door. She never complained. She just started asking whether Uncle Caleb had another place he liked better. Caleb's hand tightened around the edge of the chair. Emily remained across the room, silent. That ornament was her idea, Aaron continued. I told her not every grown man wants a little wooden house painted like a school project. She told me that was because grown men were bad at knowing what they needed. Caleb gave a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. That sounded like Lily. Even at 7. I kept it because I thought I would give it to you when you were ready to understand it. Then life moved faster than I expected. Aaron paused. The recording carried a faint room sound behind his voice, perhaps a refrigerator humming, perhaps Duke shifting on a floor years ago. So if this box ever reaches you, do not turn it into an order. Do not decide you owe me something. And do not make Lily into a responsibility because you are afraid to call her family. Caleb opened his eyes. The words were sharper than grief because they left him nowhere to hide. She has people who love her. She has a life. Respect that. If she wants you in it, let her choose. If she does not, respect that too. Another pause. This is not about rescuing anybody. Caleb looked toward Duke. The old dog's chest rose and fell slowly beneath the blanket. Aaron's voice softened. Ask yourself one thing. When the work is done, when nobody needs fixing, when the plates are cleared and dessert comes out, can you stay? The recorder crackled. That is all I ever wanted for you, brother. Not a mission. A chair you stop leaving empty. Then the message ended. No music. No final instruction. Just silence. Caleb sat for several seconds before noticing that the fire had burned lower. Emily finally spoke. He knew you well. Caleb stared at the Christmas photograph. Aaron, Lily, Duke, and that empty chair. Too well. He reached for the practical documents beneath the recorder. Retirement records. Transfer notes. A facility address outside Missoula. The paperwork explained what emotion could not. After Aaron died, Duke had retired into the care of a former military dog handler named Thomas Reed. Recently, Thomas developed mobility problems and moved into assisted living. Duke was transferred temporarily to Aaron's former training facility while staff arranged long-term care. During winter archive cleanup, Aaron's sealed equipment had been moved into a low staging room. The old ammunition box became accessible. A service door stayed open while snow equipment moved in and out. Caleb traced the route on the attached property map. From the training facility to the culvert shelter was less than 1 mile. An old retrieval path ran almost directly between them. Caleb had once served as the final recipient there during training drills. He looked toward Duke. No miracle had guided him through the snow. Memory had. Training had. Scent had. Chance had placed Caleb on the road. Everything else belonged to a dog who remembered a job long after the people who created it were gone. Caleb picked up the wooden ornament again. The blue door faced him. Stay? For the first time, the question inside the box was no longer why Duke had carried it. The question was whether Caleb would finally do what the dog had already done. Finish the route. Caleb did not contact Lily directly. Aaron had been clear about that, and Caleb knew enough now to understand the difference between returning and intruding. The next morning, Emily checked Duke again before the retired working dog program transferred him back to the facility for continued recovery. The German Shepherd was stronger, but still tired. He walked only a few careful steps before settling onto a padded mat in the transport vehicle. Caleb followed in his pickup with the ammunition box secured on the passenger side floor. At the facility, staff reviewed Aaron's contingency notes, Duke's retirement file, and the old retrieval route. Nothing in the paperwork gave Caleb authority over Lily. Nothing in Aaron's recording created an obligation. That mattered to him. A veteran family services coordinator agreed to contact Lily's guardian privately and explain only what was necessary. Caleb gave her Aaron's file number, the date on the letter, and the photograph from the box. Tell them Duke is safe, he said. Tell them Aaron left something for Lily. Then let them decide. He did not ask for an address. He did not ask for a phone number. He went home and waited. The waiting felt different from before. There was no mission to complete, no checklist to hide behind. On the first evening, Caleb placed the tiny wooden house ornament on the mantel, but could not bring himself to hang it anywhere. On the second, he made coffee and found himself staring at the word painted above the blue door. Stay? On the third, Emily called to say Duke had eaten a full meal and carried a tennis ball to one of the staff members. Caleb laughed quietly. The old dog was recovering faster than the part of Caleb that had been frozen for years. The coordinator called on the fourth afternoon. Caleb stepped onto the porch before answering. Snowmelt dripped from the roof, and the mountains beyond the trees were turning pink beneath the late winter sun. We spoke with Lily's guardian, she said. Caleb gripped the porch railing. All right. Lily remembers Duke. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment. And me? There was a pause. She remembers you too. He looked toward the tree line. For years should have been long enough for a child to forget the man who always left early. Apparently, it was not. We told her Aaron had kept something she made. The coordinator continued. She asked whether it was the little house. Caleb looked through the window toward the mantel. She remembers that? She said it had a red roof, white windows, and a blue door. Caleb said nothing. Then she asked something else. What? She asked whether you finally stayed for pie. Caleb lowered his head and laughed once, but the sound caught halfway out. What did you tell her? That I did not know. The coordinator waited. She would like to see Duke when he is medically ready. She also said she would be willing to see you. Caleb leaned against the railing. Only if her guardian is comfortable. They are. We can arrange a supervised meeting. No surprises. No surprises. A week later, Duke was cleared for a short visit at a quiet veteran community center outside Missoula. Caleb arrived early. Duke sat beside him on an old leather lead, coat clean, ears alert, strength slowly returning. The ammunition box stayed at home. This meeting did not need it. A car pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the entrance. A woman stepped out first. Then an 11-year-old girl in a dark green winter coat climbed from the passenger side. Lily had Aaron's eyes. Caleb knew that before she even looked at him. She stood still for a second, then saw Duke. The German shepherd became motionless beside Caleb. Lily lifted one hand. "Hey, Duke." His tail moved once. Then again. Caleb loosened the lead. Duke stepped forward slowly, not because anyone commanded him, but because some routes did not need to be taught twice. Lily crouched before he reached her. When Duke lowered his head beneath her hand, she smiled through tears. Caleb stayed where he was. He had spent years leaving before moments like this could ask anything of him. This time, he did not move toward the door. Lily stayed crouched beside Duke until the cold finally made her stand. The German shepherd leaned against her leg for several seconds before settling at her feet. His body relaxed in a way Caleb had not seen since before Aaron died. Lily kept one hand on Duke's neck and looked across the parking lot at Caleb. "You look older." Caleb almost smiled. "You do too. I am supposed to." That sounded enough like Aaron that Caleb had to look away for a second. Lily's guardian and the veteran family services coordinator stood several yards behind them, close enough to step in if needed, far enough to let the meeting breathe. Caleb approached slowly. He did not reach for Lily. He did not try to explain 4 years in the first 5 minutes. He simply stopped beside Duke. Lily looked down at the dog. Did he really carry Dad's box? He did. In the snow? Almost a mile. Her hand moved gently through Duke's fur. That sounds like him. Caleb knew she meant both the dog and her father. "There is something from the box that belongs to you," he said. Lily looked up. "The little house." Caleb nodded. "You remembered. I made the windows crooked. They still are." For the first time, she smiled directly at him. Caleb reached into the inside pocket of his coat and brought out the wooden ornament wrapped in soft cloth. He had asked her guardian beforehand whether bringing it would be appropriate. Lily accepted it carefully. Her thumb brushed the red roof, then the blue door. She turned it over until she found the word painted above the doorway. "Stay?" Her expression changed. "I thought Dad threw this away." "He kept it." "Why?" Caleb took a breath. "I think he was waiting until I understood it." Lily looked at him for a long moment. "Do you?" The question was simple. Caleb did not hide behind a joke. "I am starting to." Duke shifted closer to both of them and lay down across the space between their boots. Lily sat on a nearby bench, still holding the ornament. Caleb sat at the opposite end, leaving a respectful space between them. For the next half hour, they talked about ordinary things. School, snow days, Duke's terrible habit of stealing socks when he was younger, Aaron's inability to make pancakes without burning the first batch. Lily asked whether Caleb still drank coffee too late at night. He asked whether she still hated pie crust. She looked surprised. "You remember that?" "Apparently, I remember more than I thought." Then Lily became quiet. "Dad used to say you were good at coming when people needed help." Caleb looked at her. "He also said you were bad at staying after." There was no accusation in her voice. That made it harder to answer. He was right. Lily turned the ornament in her hands. "Are you going to disappear again?" Caleb felt the old instinct rise. "Promise something. Fix it. Make the moment safe with certainty." Aaron's voice returned instead. "Let her choose. Respect that." Caleb answered carefully. "I do not want to, but I think I should prove that instead of asking you to believe it today." Lily considered this. Then she nodded. "That sounds fair." Duke rested his head across Caleb's boot, his tail touching Lily's shoe. A week later, with her guardian's agreement, they met again. Then again. No grand announcement. No new family defined in a single conversation. Duke's recovery continued, and the retired working dog program began discussing a long-term placement that would allow regular contact with both Caleb and Lily. By early December, Lily's guardian invited Caleb to a small Christmas gathering. He arrived carrying no expensive gift, only the old wooden house wrapped in tissue paper. Lily took it from him and walked straight to the tree. She chose a low branch where Duke could see it from his bed. The ornament turned gently beneath the warm lights. Red roof, crooked windows, blue door. "Stay?" Caleb stood near the entryway with his coat still on. Lily glanced toward him, then toward the dining room where plates were being set. She said nothing. She did not have to. Caleb slowly removed his coat and hung it beside the others. By Christmas evening, the house no longer felt like a place Caleb had been invited into. It felt like somewhere he had already been expected. Snow rested along the porch rail and softened the dark Montana road beyond the windows. Inside, the tree lights reflected across the hardwood floor, warm and steady. Lily moved between the kitchen and dining room carrying napkins in both hands, her dark green sweater sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Duke slept near the tree on a thick blanket, one paw stretched beneath the lowest branches. Above him, the little wooden house turned gently whenever warm air from the vent moved through the room. Red roof, crooked white windows, blue door. Stay? Caleb noticed it every time he looked up. Dinner passed without ceremony. No speeches. No attempt to make the evening more important than it already was. Lily's guardian told a story about a grocery bag breaking in the driveway. Lily laughed so hard she nearly spilled her cider. Caleb helped clear the plates because that was what he always did. He carried dishes to the kitchen, rinsed them, wiped the counter, and checked the coffee maker. His hands knew how to be useful. Then dessert arrived. 2 pies were placed on the table. Apple and pecan. Coffee was poured. Chairs scraped gently against the floor. Caleb looked toward the hallway where his coat hung beside the others. The old instinct rose before he could stop it. Roads would get colder. Snow might start again. He could leave now and still call the evening good. Nobody had asked him for anything more. That was exactly the moment Aaron had described. When the work was done. When nobody needed fixing. When dessert came out. Caleb stood beside his chair with one hand resting on the back. Lily was cutting a small piece of apple pie. She did not look at him. She did not ask him to stay. She had already done that once when she was 7. Caleb looked at Duke. The old German shepherd opened his eyes briefly, then closed them again. No command. No box. No route left to finish. Caleb pulled his chair back and sat down. Lily glanced up. Nothing dramatic changed in her expression. Just a small softness around her eyes. She slid the pie plate toward him. You still do not eat the crust first, right? Caleb looked at the slice. You remember that? I remember important things. He smiled. Apparently so do I. They ate slowly. The conversation moved to school, a teacher Lily liked, and whether Duke should be allowed to sleep on furniture once his long-term care plan was finalized. Caleb argued no. Lily argued yes. Duke remained asleep, wisely refusing to take sides. Later, when the dishes were stacked and the coffee had gone lukewarm, Lily sat cross-legged near the tree and adjusted the wooden house ornament so the blue door faced outward. It looks better there, she said. Caleb nodded. It does. She looked over her shoulder. Are you coming tomorrow? The answer came without planning. I will be here tomorrow. Lily smiled and returned to the tree. Caleb leaned back in his chair. Outside, snow began falling again, light enough to disappear against the darkness. Inside, nobody reached for a coat. Nobody watched the clock. Duke shifted in his sleep until one paw rested against Caleb's boot. The ammunition box was miles away, stored safely and closed. It had done what it was meant to do. The dog had finished carrying it. The message had finished waiting. And Caleb, for the first time in years, was still sitting in the chair after everything useful was done.